The man everyone believed was mute carried a truth heavier than his silence. On our wedding night, the moment we were finally alone, he spoke to me for the first time. The sound of his voice shook something deep inside me. It didn't belong to an ordinary man. Every word he uttered carried an untold story, a buried pain, and a dangerous secret. In that moment, I realized the man I married wasn't silent. He had simply been waiting for the right moment to speak. This is the story of how my life changed forever the night my husband broke his silence. Please stay with me until the end, because what I discovered will leave you questioning the very meaning of trust and love. And if my story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. I had always believed silence was a kind of purity. My father used to say, "A quiet man is a thoughtful man." Perhaps that is why I was drawn to Daniel. He was unlike anyone I had ever met. In a world full of noise, gossip, and endless chatter, he carried himself with a calmness that felt almost holy. He never spoke, not a single word, and yet his presence filled every room he entered. People whispered about him, of course. Some said he was cursed, others claimed he was born without a voice. But I didn't care. His silence felt like a shield, and I thought it would protect me. Before I met Daniel, my life was simple. I worked in my mother's bakery, waking before dawn to knead dough, the smell of yeast and sugar clinging to my hands. My father had passed years ago, leaving behind debts that weighed heavily on us. My mother carried the burden with quiet dignity, though I often saw her shoulders sag under its weight. I tried to help, but the bakery barely kept us afloat. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if we would lose everything. And then Daniel appeared. He came to the bakery one afternoon, dressed in a crisp suit that seemed out of place among the flour-dusted counters. He didn't speak, only pointed to the bread he wanted. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, and I felt something stir inside me. He returned the next day and the day after that, always silent, always watching. My mother said his silence was a blessing, that a man who didn't speak, wouldn't argue, wouldn't shout, and wouldn't hurt. I wanted to believe her. Our courtship was quiet, almost surreal. He sent letters written in neat handwriting, short but thoughtful. He never called, never whispered my name, but his silence felt like devotion. When he proposed, he didn't say a word. He simply placed the ring in my hand, his eyes searching mine for an answer. I said yes. Perhaps I was naive, perhaps I was desperate for stability, but I believed his silence was love. The wedding was grand, far beyond anything I had imagined. Guests marveled at the decorations, the chandeliers dripping with crystals, and the tables heavy with food. My relatives whispered behind my back, wondering how a mute man had built such wealth. Some said he inherited it, others claimed he was ruthless in business. I didn't care, I only cared that he chose me. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands trembled slightly, and I thought it was nerves. I didn't know it was something else. That night, after the guests had left and the laughter had faded, we entered the bedroom. The silence was heavier than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed, my dress still clinging to me, my heart racing. Daniel stood by the window, his back to me, his shoulders tense. I thought he was simply exhausted. I whispered his name, though I knew he wouldn't answer. But then, he did. "I'm sorry," he said. The sound of his voice froze me. It was deep, steady, and filled with something I couldn't name. My breath caught in my throat. For years, everyone believed he was mute. For months, I believed it too. And now, on our wedding night, he spoke. My hands trembled as I clutched the sheets. You can talk?" I whispered. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. "Yes," he said. "I can talk. I've always been able to talk." The room spun. My mind raced. Why had he pretended all this time? Why had he let the world believe he was mute? My heart pounded against my chest, fear and confusion mixing with disbelief. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you lie?" He walked toward me, each step deliberate, his gaze never leaving mine. "Because silence was safer," he said. "Because speaking would reveal too much." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but his voice held me captive. It wasn't just the shock of hearing him, it was the weight of his words. They carried secrets, heavy and dangerous. I could feel it. My husband wasn't mute. He was hiding something, something that could destroy us both. In the days leading up to the wedding, I had noticed small things, moments I brushed aside, the way he avoided certain people in town, the way his eyes darkened when business was mentioned, and the way he locked his study door at night. I thought it was simply his nature, his privacy. But now, hearing his voice, I realized those were clues. Clues I had ignored. I sat frozen, my mind replaying every moment we had shared, every silence, every gesture, every letter. All of it was built on a lie. My husband wasn't mute. He was a man with a voice, a man with secrets, a man who chose silence over truth. And now, on the night we became husband and wife, he had decided to speak. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What are you hiding?" He didn't answer immediately. He sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his jaw clenched. Finally, he said, "The truth is not something you can hear all at once. It will break you, but I can't keep it from you anymore. You deserve to know." My heart ached. I wanted to trust him, but how could I? He had lied to me, lied to everyone. And yet, his voice carried a pain so raw, so human that I couldn't turn away. I needed to know. I needed to understand the man I had married. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, Daniel began to tell me his story. His words were slow and deliberate, each one heavy with meaning. He spoke of betrayal, of loss, of choices that had cost him more than money. He spoke of a past buried beneath silence, a past that explained why he had chosen to live without a voice. And as he spoke, I realized my life was no longer mine. It was tied to his secrets, his pain, and his silence. The man I married was not mute. He was a man who had waited until the world was quiet, until we were alone, until there was no turning back, to finally speak. And what he said that night would change everything. The knock at the door wasn't loud, yet it carried a weight that pressed itself into my skin. It came again, slow, measured, deliberate, like someone who never needed to ask permission to enter any room he approached. Adrian inhaled sharply, the sound barely audible, but the fear in his eyes said everything. I had never seen him look that small, not even when I believed he was mute. "Stay here," he whispered, and despite everything, hearing his voice again made my heart twist in a painful blend of fear and tenderness. But I grabbed his hand before he could walk away. "You can't face him alone." His fingers wrapped around mine, firm but trembling. "I've been facing him alone my whole life," he said softly. "I know how to survive him. You don't." The knocking stopped. Silence hovered like a held breath. Then the doorknob shifted with a slow scrape of metal against metal. "He has a key," Adrian whispered. "He always has a key." My pulse thudded in my ears as the door opened and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. His presence alone seemed to dim the room. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, perfectly crisp and perfectly pressed, with a silver wristwatch that gleamed under the soft lamplight. His expression was calm. Too calm. A man used to control. A man who didn't need threats because his silence did the speaking. "Father," Adrian said, barely above a whisper. I had never heard a grown man shrink his own voice before. It broke something inside me. The man's cold blue eyes flicked to me first, then returned to his son as though I were merely a temporary inconvenience in a world carved entirely for him. He stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with a click that made my stomach tighten. "So," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "you've finally decided to break your silence." Adrian straightened instinctively, though his shoulders remained tight. "I spoke to my wife. She deserved the truth." His father's eyes hardened. Not with anger, but with disappointment so sharp it felt rehearsed. No, Adrian, she deserved the story you were given to tell. The silence that protects this family, the image we built, the discipline that made you who you are. I stepped forward before I even realized I had moved. He didn't choose silence, I said quietly. It was forced on him. For the first time, the man really looked at me. His eyes scanned my face as if evaluating my worth, my usefulness, and my flaw. And you, he said with a tone that chilled me, are already speaking out of turn. Adrian stepped between us instantly. Don't speak to her like that. His father tilted his head, almost amused. So you have a voice after all, a strange thing to waste on defiance. A tremor ran through Adrian, but he didn't step back. I'm done pretending. I'm done being silent. His father walked closer until he was just inches from his son. You think your voice is strength? He murmured. No, your silence was strength. Your silence kept us respected. Your silence kept you alive. The word alive hung in the air like a threat. That letter you left, I said quietly, wasn't a warning, it was a threat. He didn't even deny it. He simply shifted his gaze to me, studying me as though deciding whether I was worth engaging. My son was raised to protect a legacy, not to give in to sentiment. He loves you, I whispered. Can't you see that? For a moment, just one fleeting second, something shifted in his expression. Pain, regret, loss. And then it hardened again, as though he had buried the softness long ago. Love, he said, is a luxury men like us cannot afford. Adrian took my hand again. I'm not living by your rules anymore. His father's eyes lowered to our intertwined hands. His nostrils flared slightly. That was the first real sign of emotion he had shown. You think your marriage changes anything? He asked. You think this woman will save you? She is nothing more than a weakness that will one day be used against you. I felt Adrian's fingers tighten around mine. She's my wife, he said. She's my choice. The man's jaw clenched, and choices have consequences. Without warning, he pulled a brown folder from inside his suit jacket and tossed it onto the bed. It slid across the sheets, stopping in front of us like a silent ultimatum. What is that? I asked. Truth, his father said. The kind your husband has conveniently left out. A cold wave rushed over me. I looked at Adrian, and for the first time, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Something inside me shook. Open it, his father commanded. I reached for it slowly, my fingers trembling. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, and black and white photographs, some old, some newer. And in the center, a single headline that made my blood run cold. Millionaire's son involved in brother's death. My breath caught. What is this? Adrian finally lifted his gaze, and the pain in his eyes was so deep it nearly broke me. It's not what it looks like, his father scoffed. It's exactly what it looks like. He killed his brother, and he stayed silent to hide the truth. No, Adrian's voice cracked as he stepped forward. I didn't kill him. I was there. Yes, but it wasn't my fault. His father's face hardened. A brother who cannot defend himself is as good as guilty. My heart pounded. Explain, I whispered. Adrian's breath hitched. We were kids, playing near the lake. My brother slipped. I tried to catch him, but I couldn't. He hit his head on the rocks. I screamed for help, but his voice broke. My father wasn't home. My mother was asleep. I ran back for help, but by the time we reached him, it was too late. Tears burned behind my eyes. His father stepped closer, voice like steel. You should have pulled him out. You should have saved him. He wasn't breathing, Adrian cried. I tried. The man's expression remained stone. Your voice that day meant nothing. Your silence now means everything. Something inside me snapped. You've tortured him his entire life for something he didn't do. His eyes turned cold. I shaped him. I made him strong. No, I whispered. You made him afraid. The man's lips curled into a thin, bitter smile. Fear keeps men alive. Adrian pulled me behind him subtly, protectively. We're done, he said, his voice steady. You don't control me anymore, or my marriage. His father studied him for a long moment, then stepped back, smoothing his suit as though brushing off something distasteful. Very well, he said. You want freedom? You can have it, but you walk away from the company, from the inheritance, from everything. Adrian inhaled sharply. Fine. Think carefully, his father said. Silence gave you power. Speaking will take everything away. Adrian squared his shoulders. Then take it. His father stared at him for a long, tense moment, something sorrowful flashing in his eyes, before he turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. You'll regret this. Adrian's voice rose with a strength I had never heard from him. No, I'll live because of this. The door closed behind his father with a soft click, and then the room finally breathed. Adrian collapsed into my arms, his body shaking with years of withheld grief. I held him tightly, feeling his heart pound against mine, feeling the weight of decades lift from him like fog in sunlight. We'll be okay, I whispered. You're not alone anymore. He buried his face in my shoulder. I don't know how to be anything but silent. That's why I'm here, I said softly. We'll learn your voice together. And for the first time, truly the first time, he sobbed. Not silently, not hidden, but with sound. Real, trembling human sound. His voice had finally come home. My dear listeners, sometimes the people we love speak in ways we don't understand. Sometimes their silence isn't emptiness at all. It's the place where their bruised memories hide. If someone in your life is hurting quietly, hold their hand a little tighter, listen a little deeper, and remember that every voice, no matter how long it has been buried, deserves to be heard. Would you have stayed by his side if you were me? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for listening, for sharing your hearts, and for standing with me until the very end. May your homes be filled with courage, healing, and voices that finally feel safe to speak.